There is no doubt that the outcome would have been different had Cinque and his people attempted a revolt aboard a fully manned transatlantic slave ship. Very few captives ever dared mutiny once a ship left Africa on the infamous voyage of violence and death, known in the trade as the Middle Passage. Cinque and his people were captives on an undermanned coastal merchant schooner. The odds that they could have overpowered the well-armed crew of a transatlantic slaver were virtually non-existent. On those ships, captains and crew never let their guard down.
These ships were armed camps. These ships had a massive security problems because Africans did not go willingly into their slavery.
The Africans' desperation and hopelessness meant that security problems persisted throughout the Middle Passage, the major leg of the Great Triangular Slave Route. It was the route followed by the slave ships across the Atlantic to the Americas. Most of the ships transported Africans from the coast of West Africa to Brazil or the West Indies. Only about 5% of their human cargo came to the United States. A typical slave ship could make the Middle Passage in 5 to 12 weeks. For the traders, the formula was simple: cramming as many Africans as possible into a ship and then delivering them to market alive equaled the greatest possible profit. But that was also the traders' dilemma. How could they best bring the Africans across alive?
The mortality was high. 15–20% was not uncommon for people to die on these passages. Some entrepreneurs thought the more we cram aboard the ship, the more we're going to have to walk off on the other end. They were the tight packers. Others said, if you treat these people a little bit better, they're more likely to live. We're going to cram fewer into a ship. They were the loose packers. Slaves shackled together below decks often had no more than about 24 inches, with very little room and often lying in their own filth because of the way that they were shackled together.
The British slave ship Brooks broke all known records in tight packing by jamming 609 Africans in a ship meant to hold 300. Some scholars now believe that whether a ship was loosely or tightly packed made no appreciable difference in the Africans' mortality rates.
The ship we're aboard was built in 1841, but a lot of the construction details are similar to the slave ships. Clearly, the overhead is low. You have to crouch to get through here, but it was even worse than that. Oftentimes, the 'tween decks of a ship like this was partitioned so that 2 tiers of slaves could be packed aboard, chained to each other, not only suffering the indignity of not being able to sit up, but their flesh rubbing against the rough sawn planks of the ship itself.
The hardships suffered by the Negroes during the passage are scarcely to be conceived. Dr. Alexander Falconbridge, ship's surgeon.
Falconbridge practiced on board British slave ships. In 1788, he wrote about becoming physically ill after spending only 15 minutes in a slaver's hold.
When I had to enter the slave deck, I was forced to crawl over the slaves. The Negroes are frequently packed so close together that they have not so much room as a man in his coffin. I was so overcome with the heat, stench, and foul air that I nearly fainted. It was only with assistance I could get on deck.
Hundreds of Africans were forced to use 3 or 4 large buckets as toilets.
Our wretched situation was aggravated by the filth of the necessary tubs into which the children often fell and almost suffocated. O lauda equiano.
The intense body heat created a thick, wet steam that hung in the air like fog. The stench often preceded them into port.